Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I just thought I'd start recording videos of me reading Qisas al-Nabiyyin and over time gradually building an Arabic model, a grammatical model that's really only practical for parsing and understanding, rather than becoming fluent at Arab, as an example. Um, this I'll try my best to aim this at beginners, although when I have no face in front of me, it's a bit difficult to tell how well I'm doing, but we'll give it a shot. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, this is well known, it means in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. That's how it's typically translated. There's other ways you could translate it. We won't delve too much into it since that's kind of outside the text. I'm going to start by doing an interlinear method. So we have the word men, meaning who, and I recommend you memorize these words not by flashcards, but just by rereading this whole thing multiple times throughout multiple days, and eventually you'll start to know the words. So men means who, kasara means broke, and al asnam is kind of like two words because we have al meaning the and asnam meaning statues, plural. So then, if you just look at the interlinear, who broke the statues? Doesn't always work out like this, but in this case, we have a very clear translation from just doing word for word. Okay. This is the name of the first story in this book. It's an anthology. And then now the name of the first chapter. Ba'i'u, seller. El, meaning the. Asnam, statues. Seller, the statues. Now this time we don't have an obvious meaning. It just seems like it's two names juxtaposed next to each other. Whenever you have something like that, there are other forms of evidence you could use, you could say, to confirm this interpretation. But generally speaking, if you have two names juxtaposed to each other, then it should be translated as such. So, the parts in parentheses are implied. The seller of the statues. The word of is implied because of the juxtaposition, and the word the is implied because it's juxtaposed to a definite noun, the el here. Right, so if it was ba'i'u asnam, it would only be the of that's implied. But because we have ba'i'ul asnam, now you have the and of both implied. I won't get too much into detail about this grammatical construction, for now at least. Inshallah we'll get into more detail later. For now, just realize when you have two names juxtaposed next to each other, and there's no clear way to resolve their meaning, then implying of in the middle might be your fix and might be the correct interpretation. And later on, we'll see additional symptoms, grammatical symptoms, that confirm our interpretation, such as the kasra at the end and the single dhamma here. But I won't get into that right now. Okay. Qabla means before. Ayyaman means days. Kathira, or you would say kathiratin. So kathira, if it's the word you're stopping on, قبل أيام كثيرة. But if I'm continuing, قبل أيام كثيرة كثيرة جدا. And same thing here, جدا if I'm stopping, جدا if there were more words after it and I was continuing to read. It's not a terribly important rule, but just so that you don't get confused if I'm pronouncing certain things oddly. So this means many, kathira. This also means many, right? It's doubling. It's the same word. And then this means very. So before days, many, many, very. Now we're starting to get weird orders in Arabic. And furthermore, I would like to just highlight the periods here and here. This is a false period, and so is this. You should know that Arabic did not have punctuation in it until like the 20th century. And there still has not really been a standard. There have been proposed standards, and there have been whatever editors feel like doing. And so far in the book world, at least, I believe in BBC and Al Jazeera they're much more consistent. But in the book world, they just put the periods wherever they want. So they're not terribly helpful. I will just recommend you pretend they're not there because they can actually be more confusing than they are helpful. So a period is supposed to signify the completeness of a sentence, and yet this is not a complete sentence. We're saying before many days. Before many days what? What happened, right? So it's not a complete sentence. So ignore the period. And same thing here. Ignore the period because we're saying before many, many days, or before very many, many days, right? A long, long time ago, you could also translate it as. So, not a complete sentence. Period should be ignored. We continue. Kana means was. Fi means in. Qaryatin means village. Rajul means man. Mashhur means famous. Jiddan means very, as we discussed above. So, was in village, man, famous, very. Okay. What does that mean? So, a quick note about the word kana. I translated it as was. Normally in Arabic, if you would just say fi qaryatin, basically just scrap out the kana. You still have a complete sentence. So let's scrap all this, scrap out the kana. في قرية رجل مشهور جدا. In a village, notice the word a is not actually in the Arabic, but it's implied. There's no actual word for a or n. It's all implied. There is only a word for the. So if there's no the, then it's an n, basically. It's indefinite. So in a village, a very famous man exists. Right? So man, famous, very. The order is flipped between Arabic and English, right? The mashhur would come before the rajul, and the very would come before the mashhur. So a very famous man. Whereas in Arabic, it's rajul mashhurun jiddan. It's the opposite order. Okay, so in Arabic, this is a complete sentence, and yet there is no verb. في قرية رجل مشهور جدا. In a village, there is a very famous man. Now in English, I have to add there is. That doesn't have to exist in Arabic though. That can be implied. However, you can explicate it by saying kana. Right? And all kana does is just put it in the past tense. So in without the kana, it would be there is, but with kana, it's now there was, right? There was a very famous man in a village. So I hope that makes sense. We're gonna talk more about kana and what it really does in future videos, inshallah. But for now, this should be sufficient. So kana will always have two parts within its speech. The first part is the thing spoken of, the subject, and the second part is the predicate. What are we learning about it, right? So the subject here is rajul, specifically, actually, right? So this here is a subject, and the predicate is actually this whole phrase. في قرية. So that we learned, we're talking about a man, and we learned about this man that he's in a village. Okay, so that's the subject, and both of these words are the predicate. And then this acts as an adjective, and this acts as an adverb, right? Because this describes this, and this describes that. Okay, so now we have the full sentence. Before very many days, there was a very famous man in a village. So you might just have to get used to the order. Thankfully, this whole chapter is very repetitious in its usage of kana, so you should get fairly familiar with it by the end. Now, I said there were no periods back in the day. Only they were a late introduction into the language. So how did they signify the end of sentences? Well, they didn't. They signified the start of new sentences, and they did this with the word wa. Wa has many meanings. One of them is and, but really you could also just translate it as the period itself. That's why you see wa all the way throughout. You shouldn't actually, if you were to translate this, you would not be saying and. You would just be placing a period, right? So that signifies, that confirms our theory that this indeed is the end of the sentence, and that we're starting a new one. Okay, so wa, new sentence. Kana, was, ism, name. This, هذا. Notice I'm saying ha, it's as if there's an alif next to the ha. It's not written, but it's pronounced. هذا الرجل. Alif, lam means the. Rajul means man. Azar. Azar is a proper noun. It's got no meaning. Okay. So was name this the man Azar? Again, we can have removed was if you wanted to, and it would still be a complete sentence, except it would be in the present tense, right? But kana makes it in the past tense. So, اسم هذا الرجل آزر. وكان اسم هذا الرجل آزر. Ismu, name, هذا, this. So actually in English it would be the other way. Sorry. This would be the two juxtapositions that we talked about before. Name of this man. Name of this man. In Arabic, we repeat the definiteness. Hada is by itself already definite. So to say this man, we have to also say هذا الرجل. هذا الرجل. Notice how it continues, how it flows into the next word. هذا الرجل. This means this man. Okay. The alif lam tells us that this is continuing the hada, that it's talking about the same hada, right? This man, this woman, this cat, this building. All of them would have el in the next word. Whereas if you were to say hada rajul, this would mean this is a man, right? Whereas هذا الرجل, this man, and then you'd continue off because that's not a complete sentence. So that's why we have the alif lam. اسم هذا الرجل آزر. So that's the second part of kana. That's the predicate, right? So the subject is ism. We're learning about the name of this man. And the predicate, what did we learn about the name? Is Azar. So the name is Azar. So you could have said literally, وَكَانَ الْإِسْمُ, right? And the name was Azar. But we don't know whose name it was. So we say, and the name of this man was Azar. right? So bare bones الاسم آزر. That's the bare bones sentence. But then we can turn it into this. So this means الاسم آزر. The name is Azar, present tense. So we can turn it into past tense with kana. The name was Azar. The name was Azar because of we added kana. And notice it comes in the beginning rather than the middle. And then we can say whose name. We remove the alif lam to say that. The alif lam cannot exist if you're saying of. Kana ismu الرجل Azar. That's still a complete sentence. So the name of the man was Azar. And then I want to be more specific. I want to say this man, right? So I just add هذا right in the middle. اسمه هذا الرجل Azar. And that's how we have the full sentence. That's how I build it up to that full meaning and its full glory. Okay. Wa is a new sentence. Kana, hopefully you know what that means by now. Azar, the name. Yabi'u, sells. Al-asnam, the statues, right? We covered it already before. So, let's again try to strip it to its core meaning. Azaru yabi'u al-asnam. So Azar, what does this mean? Right, I've stripped out this, I've stripped out this, I've stripped out. Well, that's actually it's those two words. So notice yabi is a verb. So we're gonna have a verb. Azar sells the statues. Fairly straightforward. We add the word kana. Well, how does this make now sense, right? I just spoke weird English. How does this make sense now? Because there is no was here, right? So we can say Azar. This has to be a habitual kind of verb, right? Sells. Or you could say selling. Yabi' can also mean selling, but in this case it means sells. We can say Azar used to sell the statues, right? Because now it's in the past. This is a past habit. So used to sell the statues. And then if you want to say wa, so you could translate this as and, but you could also just not translate it because it only means the start of a new sentence, right? In this case, wa has many other meanings, but in this particular case, it means the start of a new sentence. Okay. So that is that one. Okay. وكان في هذه القرية بيت كبير جدا. So we know كان في, we know already to mean in. هذه is the feminine version of هذا. Okay, so it means this as well, same meaning, it's just feminine. القرية, we'll go into why it's feminine. Well, actually I'll just tell you right now, it's because the ta مربوطة. 99% of the time if you have a ta مربوطة, the word is feminine, right? Notice in this case when we said هذا الرجل, there is no ta مربوطة. And likewise when we said, actually was that, yeah, that's the only time we use هذا. So okay, this was a masculine word and this is a feminine word because of the ta مربوطة. Okay, so this means village. قرية, we already covered it before, except now it has an alif lam, so now we say the قرية. The village. Beiton, beit means house. Kabir means big. Jiddan, very. Okay, so وكان في هذه القرية بيت كبير جدا. I would recommend, if you're practicing this, to write your own, like print 2 copies of this page, make one that's interlinear, like this, with the translations at the bottom and notes at the side to help you understand this text. And then another one that's just completely blank, right? And you can use the blank one to test yourself and test yourself habitually. Do it every day. Do it a few times in a day if you like. And then when you're stuck and you don't know the answer or you have a question, you go to your notes version. You can write down the question if you haven't found the answer, and you can review there. So that's what I recommend. And then hopefully with enough practice, you'll get all these words down. They will be easy peasy lemon squeezy. So وكان في هذه القرية بيت كبير جدا. Let's strip it down to its core essential words, right? So we can get rid of what, we can get rid of kana, we can get rid of هذه, we can get rid of كبير جدا. Okay, so we can just say في القرية في القرية بيت. What does that mean? In the village there's a house. Notice A is not in the Arabic, but the lack of a definite makes it indefinite. So in the village there's a house. Okay? Now let's add back all these words. Kabir means big, right? And the adjectives come after the noun. So big house, right? Baytun kabir. Jiddan means very. So again, and jiddan comes at the end in Arabic. It has to come at the end, whereas in English it has to come first. Very big house. I'll delete this so it's not as confusing. And then we can add back هذه. So in this village, which village? Oh, I just said it already. In the village, but I can also say in this village, right? So I'm being more particular now. I'm being more specific. And then if there is, well, if you add back kana, right, it's now in the past. So there was. Notice we had, again, there is was just totally implied. This was in parentheses. This should have been in parentheses because there is no there is in the Arabic, right? It's just implied. You can have complete sentences in Arabic. This is to be the rest of that. You can have complete sentences in Arabic without any verb. So now with the full meaning, in this, the village, or you could say in this village, right? The word the in English should be redundant, but in Arabic it's very necessary, as we've explained above, which I've deleted, but it was there. In this village there was a very big house. Okay. وكان في هذا البيت أصنام كثيرة جدا. Okay. Hopefully you figured out what this means before I told you, because we've covered all these words before, right? So كان means was, في هذا البيت means the house. أصنام, statues, and I recommend you really try to figure out. All these ones have new words, so you might not be able to. Statues, right? Kathira means many, and this one means very. Okay, so should we? Yeah, let's strip it down. Why not? Okay, so what we have here, we can get rid of wa, we can get rid of kana, we can get rid of hada. We can get rid of this, and this, right? So we just have fil bayti asnam. In the house, what does this mean actually? You should try to translate it on the one. Fil bayti asnam. What does that mean? It means in the house there are statues. Present tense, right? Again, there are is implicit. It's not actually in the Arabic. It's implied. There are statues. Okay, now we bring back هذا. In this house, or if you want to be literal, in this, the house, there are statues. Okay, now we can bring back أصنام. Or we can just actually bring back all three of them, since in this house there are statues. Very many statues, right? Very many statues. Now we make it in the past tense. In this house there were statues. Very many statues. And then what just means, and in this house there were many statues. Very many statues. And again, the and just means a period, so you don't actually have to translate it as and. You could literally just translate it as that right there. وكان الناس يسجدون لهذه الأصنام. Okay. Is and. Actually, let's just get rid of all the non-essentials. These are all the non-essentials, right? So everything else is necessary. Actually, we'll get rid of that too. And you'll be like, what? I'll explain. Yesjud means this part by itself. Yesjud means prostrate. Una is a pronoun meaning they. Li means to. In this case, at least, a lot of these prepositions have to do, their meaning are derived from the verb itself that's being used, right? So, in the particular case, when it's used with yasjud, it means to. Li hadihi, we can actually get rid of this for now. Al asnam, these statues. So what we have in bare bones skeletal version of the sentence, يسجدون الأصنام. يسجدون للأصنام. يسجدون li. We're still keeping the lam. So let me rewrite it. يسجدون للأصنام. Okay, I don't write the alif because when there's a lam before it, the alif goes away. So yasjuduna lil asnam. That's the bare bones sentence that we can get from this, and it means they prostrate to the statues. It's a complete sentence. Okay. Now let's add back hadihi, which, as I've said, is a feminine version of this. Yasjuduna. Let's rewrite that. يسجدون لهذه الأصنام. So you would translate this, if you're doing literal, they prostrate to the statues, or to this statues, but in English we would say these, right? We would say these, and that's because in Arabic هذه is also used for plural objects. Okay, it's not used for plural people, but it is for objects. And so هذه could actually mean this or these. We'll go into the actual rule much more, inshallah. But for now, this should be sufficient. So these, هذه means this or these. يسجدون لهذه الأصنام. So they prostrate to these statues. Okay? Or to the statues, if you want to be specific. Again, because if you were to say هذا أصنام, if you were to drop the alif lam, this would mean these are statues. هذا أصنام. Sorry, not هذا. I'm being ridiculous. هذه أصنام. You would say these are statues, right? هذه أصنام. But when you say الأصنام, then you're saying these statues. Okay? So يسجدون لهذه الأصنام. Now what does nas doing here then? This is actually the doer. الناس. Because who are the una? Who are the they? Right? It's the nas. It goes back to the name before it. And anytime you have the doer before the verb, you have to have a pronoun because the doer has to come after the verb in Arabic. It has to, right? There is no other option. In this case, when it says yabi'u, you might be like, where is the verb? Where is it? The doer comes before. Azar is the one selling. It's not coming after yabi'u. But that's because in this case, he, the pronoun he, can be implied. But they cannot be implied. It has to be explicit, right? It has to be explicit. So while he can be implied, hence why we don't see a doer in front of yabi'. If you have they, if it's a plural doer, it has to be explicit. It has to be made explicit. So you cannot say an-nasu yashjud. That's incorrect, right? Because the doer has to come after the verb, and an-nas is a plural, and so that has to be made explicit. And so you can say yashjudu nasu lihadi al-asnam. You can put the nas after the verb yashjudu nasu lihadi al-asnam. That fixes it. Or you can put a pronoun. An-nasu yashjuduna lihadi al-asnam. Right? The una being the pronoun. Both of these fix the problem. You now have a doer in front of the verb. Right? So the people prostrate to the statues, to these statues. Kana makes it in the past tense, right? So again, yashjud is a habitual kind of verb, and so you would translate it as used to. The people used to prostrate to these statues. Notice I'm not really translating the pronoun anymore, because in English, the doer coming before the verb is very natural, right? In Arabic, though, the pronoun has to be there. Okay, so that's why hopefully you can see why I'm kind of stripping the sentence down to its essential meanings, to its essential words, to skeletal bare bones words, so you can see how the sentence builds up. Okay. Let's do that again here, but let's first translate the new words. Yashjud. Actually, it's all, no new words here. وَكَانَ آزِرُ يَشْجُدُ لِهَذِهِ الْأَصْنَامِ. So you can try to figure out, let's play a game. Translate this, right? So just يَشْجُدُ لِلْأَصْنَامِ. يَشْجُدُ لِلْأَصْنَامِ. I'd be like, yashjud. There's no pronoun, there's no doer after, right? But remember, the word he, the pronoun he, the doer he, can be implied. So, yashjudu lil asnam, he prostrates to the statues. Okay. Now, let's add back هذه. يشجد لهذه الأصنام. Translate that. He prostrates to these statues. Okay, now we add back Azar. Azar prostrates to these statues. Now we add back Kana. Azar used to prostrate to these statues, right? And what is not translatable because it just means new sentence. Okay. Ya'bud means worship. So we can again strip. Ya'budul asnam. He worships the statues. Okay. Let's add hadi. Translate that. Ya'budu hadi al-asnam. He worships these statues. Add Azar. Azar worships these statues. Kana. Azar used to worship these statues. and wa means and, or we can just not translate it. And there you go. We are done. We are done. It's not that intimidating, hopefully. Not that many new words, I don't think. If you just read it a few times, it should be fairly easy to memorize and nail down. Um, but yeah, that's it for today. Inshallah, tomorrow we shall learn more Arabic.